Here we go. Hello, it's day 11, I believe. Can't quite believe that I'm continuing with this, but it is worth the journey to tell the story. I thought I would tell two things. One, obviously, my voice is actually coming back, which is kind of fun. And I have realized that a big part of that is munching on fresh garlic. No, sorry, fresh ginger. Munch on fresh ginger. There's actually these things called Ginger Soother, and they are actually, it's a drink that you can get at a health food store. Very helpful as well, I have found. As to the garlic, what I was going to say was that I don't highly recommend fresh garlic. I did try that in desperation to get better. Something I read said, hey, just chop up a tablespoon of fresh garlic and swallow it with water. And I gave it a whirl and promptly threw it all up. So I do not recommend fresh garlic. I recommend fresh ginger for if you've got the cold. Yes, there is a Christmas tree behind me. I am one of those. Now, in my defense, I do have hopefully a surgery still coming up next week, so I'm starting early. I kind of like to start early and stretch it all out because it's just more fun. Made me feel better when I walked into Ken Stanton today that they actually had a Christmas tree up too, so it's not just me. So we're celebrating ginger, me feeling better, and my Christmas tree. All that's the fun stuff before I jump into what I wanted to talk about today, because today is the 22nd anniversary of the day that my first husband launched into glory. And I wanted to just talk about that for a minute because I realize there's a lot of people out there that don't know this part of the story, and it's a very fundamental part of what makes me who I am. Because you see, not only did I watch my first husband breathe his last breath, but in that moment, a transaction occurred that I was a part of that made heaven become real. Heaven literally just became real. And how that happened, I'll tell you. Jason's had a hard day. Obviously, 22 years ago, he was kind of struggling. And but as the end of the day drew near, I had been talking with a bunch of different people, talking with friends, and as they would come and go, and I would kind of tell different things and say different things, and finally I got to a point where I realized that I was just at a point I looked at somebody and I said, you know, either he's about to be raised up off that bed or I have nothing to worry about. Like, it's all going to be okay. It was kind of a crazy moment to arrive at because I had been going back and forth through a lot of different emotions that day. But at this one point in the evening, I stood next to some friends. I talked through a lot of things that had happened over the last 2.5 years, and I realized that indeed God was either about to heal my husband or I had nothing to worry about, that he was going to take care of the boys and I, regardless of the outcome. And so at that point, I went and I curled up on the bed next to Jason, and I don't know, I wasn't there, but maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It wasn't a very long time, but in that time, I just had this sense of God's presence wrapped tightly around and with me. And as I felt him near, there was just this sense almost of being hugged by Jason. I was kind of curled up over him. Of course, he wasn't moving. He was had a lot of drugs in his system at this point, but I really felt like heaven was close, and he was close. Something was happening. That's just what I remember feeling. It's like something's happening right now. I don't know what it is, but I feel this oneness with Jesus, with my husband, that I just hadn't felt in a while. And then all of a sudden, this relative of his who was sitting not far from us says, I think he just took his last breath. And so it was so crazy to me was that it was like while I was in this kind of like spiritual almost bubble with him or something, he had transferred from here to eternal glory. And this, I just never ever in all my life could have imagined that God would have orchestrated those moments in such a way that it was almost like I experienced it a little bit with him. I just remember sitting up and going, oh my gosh, like I sensed that. It's like Jesus came down and held us together for a moment and then said, okay, it's time to go, and took him away. He could have gone at any point in that day. He could have lingered from that point on for a very, very long time. And to think that two things happened. One was I had spoken enough to some friends that I had worked through during the day a lot of the questions, a lot of the angst, a lot of the concerns I had. And I had gotten to a point where I could say, all right, God, no matter what happens, I know you're near. I arrived at that place in my heart. And then I'm right next to him. And it's just like this presence just wrapped around me. And then he was gone. So honestly, the thing that happened that day, yes, I lost my first spouse, and I do not want to in any way belittle how hard that's been. It has been really hard, and I have missed him, and I have cried. But I will also say, and I've heard a lot of people say this, Don will say this, my current husband will say this about losing his spouse. It's a weird thing when you go through something so powerful with God in prayer that you go, oh my gosh, I would not ask to have them back. And have to unlearn what I just learned about the majesty and the glory of God and my distinct sense that heaven is real. I remember just feeling like it was such an honor to just walk with my grandmother, who would say, golly, do you really think this stuff is real? Do you really believe this? And I would say, Grandma, I know it is. You know, she'd lost my grandfather and was stuck here behind. And I just thought, man, Lord, I'm not going to belittle that my journey's not been always easy, but how cool it was that God had been real to me, that heaven was real to me, that I really believe those verses when it says that, you know, our eternal glory far outweighs it all. I truly believe there is something so crazy out there that it just transforms my now still 22 years later. 22 years later, I still believe it. I can think about it and feel the wonder as much right now as I did back then. So, for anybody out there, if you're struggling, you don't know if heaven's real, hey, talk to me about it some other time. I'd love to talk to you about it more. Number two, just rest assured. There's just something waiting, something amazing, something because of what Jesus Christ did on the cross. Because of what Jesus did, I got to that point and watched my best friend, my interpreter, the father of my children, breathe his last and walk into glory, assured that he was alive and well and healed and whole. So, ginger, if you're sick, chew some ginger, okay? Don't do the garlic. Deal with me as I put my tree up early. And do not forget the majesty and glory of our Father. He is at work in all broken places to make things new. And there is an eternal glory that far outweighs all of this that we're going through. All right, happy November 3rd.